Okay, welcome everybody. Shavua Tov and a happy Isser Chag. Isser Chag, the day after Pesach, where the light of Mashiach is still shining. There's still a glimmer, hopefully a glimmer in our hearts, a glimmer in our soul that what we experienced yesterday in Mashiach Suda, the festive meal of Mashiach, will give us the strength, the faith, and the wherewithal to move forward, as we say, in a gesunden Sommer, in a healthy summer. I said a healthy summer yesterday, so some people said, but yeah, it's cold outside. It feels like winter still here in Montreal. Well, you know what? Today it turned around. Beautiful weather. It looks like we're going to have beautiful weather to stay, right, Alea? It looks that way. You know, in life, there are certain things that are uplifting, that inspire us. So for many people, nice warm weather is inspirational. Cold weather, is the opposite. And the truth is, in Jewish life, it's the same thing. There are things that are inspirational. There are things that are uplifting, things that nourish our soul. And we're just happy to engage and to fulfill. Like Mashiach Suda.
Like learning.
Like learning, exactly. Like learning Torah. Exactly. For me, that's very inspiring, very fulfilling. By the Mashiach Suda, singing Hasidic melodies is extremely soulful, extremely a sense of real deeper connection that is, for me personally, amazing, that I enjoy. But then there are the things that we might feel in Jewish life that they're like a ball and chain, like perhaps Passover preparations, right? All the scrubbing you got to do, the cleaning you got to do, and even after Pesach, putting away everything. They're probably not as motivating. They might even be frustrating at times, and we don't feel that it's that inspiring, and it might be very demanding, and therefore maybe something that we're not so excited about. As the old saying goes, one man's hell is another person's paradise. So maybe for some of you ladies, it was a pleasure scrubbing and cleaning. Okay, don't all shake your heads with a no. Or better yet, for one person, Yom Kippur, they don't feel the fast. They're so engaged. They're so involved in their Yom Kippur and their davening that the fast is, an incidental. Another person, I remember I had someone, a well-known personality here in Montreal, used to go to another congregation, and he said, when I used to go there, so 3 hours passed by, and then I looked on my watch, and it was only 3 minutes. That was painful. But then, come to Chabad, as Leanna mentioned the other day, right? Davening is inspirational. That 3 hours pass by, and it might feel like 3 minutes. So some people, their Yom Kippur is like, wow, it's very appealing, and other people, they just can't wait to get to the breakfast, and that's it's a ball and chain. It's one of the things you got to do. You're Jewish, so you do it, but it's unappealing. So what do we do though? How do we confront those unappealing aspects of Yiddishkeit? So the one reaction, of course, is you reject it. The pick and choose Judaism. I pick what I choose, right? And what I like, I want to do. And the things that I don't like, I'm not going to do. The things I find meaningful, the things that I find uplifting, those are the things I'll do. And the other things, I'll just reject them. Another way to deal with this is accept it all. Why? Because it's a package deal. You know, God gave the entire Torah. He didn't give part of the Torah, so it's a package deal. So I'm accepting it all. I'll do the things that I really enjoy with a passion, and the other thing, they might be a ball and chain. After all, to win, to win the war, you might go into some battles and fail in those battles. Okay, so you fail some battles, but you're going to win the war because, by and large, you're going to be committed, and so on and so forth. As the old saying goes, there's no wins without losses. So there are some things that are a loss in my life, in my Jewish life, but it's all part of the package. So those two reactions, even though in a pragmatic, actual manner, they, one will reject and the other one will do, but they both are on an emotional level one and the same. They see those unappealing aspects of Jewish life emotionally as a pain, emotionally as a challenge, maybe at best. Psychologically, mentally, maybe that there isn't much meaning to it. There isn't personal value to this part. So in that regard, they're really the same on that level, right? So the question is, in the end, there are things in Jewish life that might be a ball and chain. There might be even things we dislike. The question is, how can we learn to even like those things, if not even love them? Is it possible that we can get there and be able to engage in those areas in a way that would be even meaningful, perhaps even enjoyable? How can we do that? So let's understand. If you look at Torah mitzvahs, we have positive commandments, we have negative commandments, the do's and the don'ts, right? Active mitzvahs and passive mitzvahs. Active mitzvahs, they're motivated by love. Passive mitzvahs are motivated by fear. When you love somebody, that leads you to do something for them. It's the same thing as with the positive commandments, right? Because of the love you have towards them, so you do them. They're an action-oriented mitzvah. By contrast, fear causes us to pull back, to hold back, right? So that is the passive mitzvahs, the prohibitions of the Torah, right? Now, what are action mitzvahs likely to do for us on an emotional level by doing them? In the act of doing a mitzvah, right? A mitzvah that you like.
You're supposed to feel good, feel more connected.
It's going to give you a warmth, exactly. It's going to give you a pride. You're going to feel an accomplishment because there's an action involved in doing the mitzvah, right? Inaction, by contrast, right? Though it might take equal effort to not do something, but it doesn't leave you with any visible reward. You don't feel an accomplishment. All you did was passively hold back, passively not do. You didn't eat that thing that's not kosher, right? You didn't say that thing that is, inappropriate to say. So it doesn't engender a warmth. It doesn't engender a sense of accomplishment. It's just like I bit my tongue. And that's all I did. So psychologically, then, it's not as satisfying as that when you went out and you did something positive, whether helping someone in need, whether praying a fervent prayer on your Yom Kippur or a regular day, or any other positive action-oriented mitzvahs, right? So maybe that's why so many people pick and choose. They pick the positive action-oriented mitzvahs to do because they engender a warmth, whether it's lighting Shabbat candles, Hanukkah candles, whether it's making a Pesach Seder or a Mashiach Suda, as opposed to people are less interested in the restrictions. The restrictions are not so rewarding. Make sense? Yeah? Any questions on that? Okay. So interesting. In a legal context, if you have a positive commandment, which is an action-oriented mitzvah, and if you have a prohibition, right, which is a passive form of a mitzvah, right, not to do, and they come together at the same moment, which one takes precedence? Does anybody know?
Could you
Passive.
give me an example? What you said?
I'll give you an example. Bris Milah is to be held on the 8th day, right, of the child's, after the child is born. Is that a positive or a negative commandment? What is it?
Positive.
Positive. A positive commandment, right? It's an action. You got to do something. Then there is Shabbos. There's a law that you're not allowed to to draw blood. You're not allowed to make a wound, right? So what happens when you make a bris on Shabbos? What are you doing? You're making a wound. You're drawing blood.
Right.
So there's a transgression of Shabbos, doing a bris. Are you allowed to do a bris on Shabbos? Yes, you are actually, right? So what do we see from that? That active mitzvahs, positive commandments, when they coincide with a prohibition, a negative commandment, a passive act, the action-oriented mitzvah takes precedence over the passive. It pushes it away. That's only when they come together. They come one after the other, they're not. But if they come...
Rabbi, so that would only be for positive commandments that have a timing, that like 8th day or something that tells you what day.
Not necessarily, no.
Because I was thinking logically, you can't undo something. So if you're not supposed to do something, that's the rule. So you can't do it.
Right.
But if you're supposed to do something, maybe you don't do it that day, you do it the next day.
Yeah, but the mitzvah is specifically, the Torah tells us, positive commandment to do a bris on the 8th day.
Right.
There's different aspects to the bris. There's being circumcised. There's the act of circumcision. The act of circumcision is to be done on the 8th day. The act of circumcising, right? That makes sense? Clear?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so Talmud tells us in Tractate Shabbos, Rish Lakish said, in a situation where an active and a passive mitzvah coincide, if it is possible to fulfill both, that is ideal. If not, that the active mitzvah override the passive mitzvah. So in our case, the active mitzvah is circumcision, the act of making a circumcision on the 8th day. It has greater value, right, than the prohibition of drawing blood and making a blemish, which you're not allowed to do on Shabbos. The Ramban, Nachmanides, he explains to us this idea that Shabbos, there's two mitzvahs. There's to remember Shabbos, which is an active mitzvah, and there's guarding Shabbos, which is a passive mitzvah, right? So Nachmanides in text number 2 explains, the truth is, you can see it, the text in front of you, of course, is that the mitzvah of remembrance is an active mitzvah, which is done out of love and leads to compassion, right? When you love somebody, do an action towards them, for them, right? So this is positive commandments, is that idea. Because one who does the command for their master loves them, and his master has compassion on him. The mitzvah to guard is a passive mitzvah, similar to the trait of judgment, which stems from fear, because one who abstains from doing something bad in the eyes of his master is afraid of him. Therefore, an active mitzvah is greater than a passive mitzvah, the same way love is greater than fear. One who fulfills the desire of his master physically and monetarily is greater than one who abstained from doing something wrong in his eyes. Thus, the halachic rule is the active mitzvah overrides the passive mitzvah. What do we have over here? So from a legal perspective, right, halachic perspective, right, only when there's a conflict they come together, not one comes after the other, right, but they come together. When there's that conflict, so in our example of the bris milah on Shabbos, right, the positive commandment takes precedent. Why? Because that expresses more love, as opposed to the negative commandment. The passive, refraining, holding back, is more out of fear, right? Now, so of course, what do we see here? Obviously, active mitzvahs are more endearing in a sense, right? Because they take precedence. And according to Chassidut, that was according to the Nachmanides. So anybody can explain to me, maybe according to Chassidus, why would the positive commandment take precedence over the negative commandment? Anybody?
Love over fear?
Well, that's what Nachmanides just explained to us. Yes, that's what we.
Chassidus too.
Huh? Well, that's
Chassidus would say that too, wouldn't it? Wouldn't Chassidus say that too?
No, because Chassidus puts love and fear on a different footing. The fear that the Nachmanides is speaking about is not the fear of presence of God. It's more the fear of perhaps punishment. So Chassidus wouldn't give that explanation that Nachmanides gives. So what's the explanation Chassidus gives? Now, by the way, Nachmanides is correct on a simplistic level. On a deeper level, well, what's the purpose of creation? Did God create the world that we should not do, or that we should do? We should do. What should we do? What should we do? Come on. I'm not answering this question. If you have to wait an hour to figure it out, huh? Go ahead.
To transform this world.
Oh, beautiful. We have to make a dwelling place for God. This world is a darkness, a concealment on God, and we need to reveal God. Every positive commandment you do reveals God. The negative commandment doesn't do it in the same manner. It doesn't produce a new light that it brings into this world. It doesn't create this union above of the male and female part of God, which we're learning in Tanya today, as a matter of fact. You know, there's only one God, by the way, just to let you know. There's only one Torah, right? And it's all connected. Whatever we learned this morning is connected with today, with right now. What we learned, yes, it's all connected. There's a oneness. So the action of creating a dwelling place for God in this world has to be to create it. Now, you have to refrain from certain things, because from that, you're going to add more what into this world? Light? Refraining from doing a prohibition is bringing more what into this? What if you, God forbid, did the prohibition? What is that doing? Bringing more light of God into this world? No. What's it doing? Bringing more? Say, I can't hear you, Leah.
Darkness.
Another word for it in Hasidic teachings.
Klipa?
Ooh. Everybody give Leah a hand. Deserves a hand. Way to go. Klipa, a shell that covers over and hides the presence of God, right? Exactly. Brings more klipa into this world. So is the point to not bring klipa in this world? Is that the ultimate goal? No. The point is to bring kedusha, holiness, light of God into this world. So therefore, the positive, when it coincides with the negative, outweighs it, because that is the ultimate purpose, is bringing the light of God into this world, transforming the world and making a dwelling place for God in this world.
Could you give me another example of the positive and negative one that could be conflicting?
For you're not allowed to have wool and linen, but the garments of the Kohen had wool and linen. Their garments were a mitzvah. So you're not allowed to. There they do. Right?
Is this why for Shabbat, one of the first things that we're encouraged to do is at least light candles if we're not doing anything else? Because that's
right. Beautiful.
and
Yeah.
if we're not refraining from turning off and on the lights, things like that.
Yes, very, very well said, Ahuba. Exactly. As a matter of fact, the 10-point campaign, Miftzah campaign, the global campaigns of the Rebbe, were all positive actions to do. Lighting Shabbat candles, putting on tefillin, studying Torah, Avas Yisrael, buying even books, Jewish books, holy books for your home. The act of just having a chumash in your home, a tanya in your home, a siddur in your home, right? Those are all action-oriented mitzvahs. The campaign wasn't, stop speaking Lashon Hara. Now, there are those who make that campaign, and I don't want to put it down because there's value to it, right? There's absolutely a value that we should guard our tongue and we should be careful in what we say. But what we see over here, that the positive mitzvah has, so to speak, overrides, at least in the halachic, jurisdiction, it overrides the prohibition. Again, when the two come together, if you can fulfill both, right, not a problem. You need to fulfill both. And not always do they come together. They might come one after the other, but when they coincide, bris milah is the perfect example. That's the perfect example. But what comes out of this is interesting, So if that's the case, it seems like the positive things to do carry a greater weight. So that makes our question even greater than all of the passive things that are more restrictive in our lives. There are more restrictions that we engage in or passively take upon ourselves. How are we supposed to do that with a greater excitement? How are we supposed to do that with a, feeling the full, what's the word? The full weight of importance and value when we see here that even from a halachic perspective, don't seem to be the same. So our question becomes even more difficult. Is that clear? So let's go to our Parsha. So we've been talking about, making a dwelling place for God, and the end, from after the Torah was given to us, and then Parshas Truma and onwards for 5 parshas we spoke about at the end of the book of Exodus about making the Mishkan the home for God, and in this sefer, the book of Vayikra, Leviticus, we speak about how bringing the offerings and bringing what brings divine gratification, the offerings on the altar to God, all of these things that we are discussing, right? And in this week's Parsha, we are coming to Parshah Shemini, which means the 8th, which is the final day of inauguration of the Mishkan. which is a very special time. 7 days before that, Moshe Rabbeinu in the previous Parsha, he was preparing everything. But on the 8th, it's Aaron, his brother, the high priest, together with the Kohanim, that they are now doing the offerings and all of the pomp and ceremony that was going on. It was an awesome day. An awesome day. This is Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And the anticipation, the joy in that day was unparalleled. God's home is being finally inaugurated. Not only that, what did that mean? We learned this in a previous parsha, if you recall. What did that mean to the Jewish people on a personal level that God's home is being inaugurated? Anybody recall? This is the final sign that the Jewish people are what? Atoned for the sin of the golden calf. Remember that after the sin of the golden calf, when Moshe Rabbeinu came down, he gave them the command. After they've been atoned on Yom Kippur, the day after, he gave them the command. Now we're going to make a home for God. Then the presence of God, the Shekhinah, the divine presence of God will rest in this home. And this will be a sign for all of us for the atonement of the Jewish people. So you can imagine the excitement. This is it. God's presence finally is here. And as it says in this week's Parsha, Moshe and Aaron went into the tent of meeting, then came out and blessed the people, and the glory of God appeared to all of the people. This was a very intense moment for everyone that participated. And as the Talmud tells us in the tractate Megillah, and it came to pass from the word Vayehi in Hebrew, on the 8th day. That's how the Parsha begins, with those words. So the Talmud tells us it's taught in a Brisa, a tradition in the Jewish oral law not incorporated in the Mishnah. On that day, there was joy before the Holy One, blessed be He, similar to the joy that existed on the day on which the heavens and earth were created. It is written here with regard to the dedication of the tabernacle, and it came to pass, Vayihi in Hebrew, right? The words, the first words of the Parsha, Vayihi b'yom hashmini, Vayihi vav yud he yud, right? So and it came to pass, Vayihi on the 8th day, and it's written there in the story of creation, and it was Vayihi erev, Vayihi boker, yom echad, one day. So the Mishkan is the first time that God is finding a permanent dwelling place in this world. Although God did dwell, where did he dwell previously? Anybody? Where did he dwell previously? Besides in a holy people like Avram and, patriarchs and the matriarchs, but where did he dwell in the world previously? One place. You were all there. You forgot. Your long-term memory is going.
Matan Torah.
Thank you. At Matan Torah. Good. Okay, someone still remembers. I know it's quite a few years ago. Not easy to remember, but it's seared into our soul. So at the Matan Torah, but that was only temporary, right? The mountain didn't become holy afterwards, but the Mishkan remains holy. And this is what happened on this day. Now, in our Parsha, not only the Jewish people celebrate that day with great joy, atonement, God's presence is palpable in the Mishkan, but something else happened that, as holy as things are, there always has to be an equilibrium. Where there's holiness, what are you going to find? You're going to find something that is the opposite. I wouldn't say unholy. I don't want to say that, but as joyful and as great as this is, we have the complete opposite. Aaron's two sons on that very day, what do? They enter into the Mishkan. It says in this week's Parsha, in text 5a, and Aaron's son Nadav and Avihu each took his pan, put fire in it, and placed incense upon it, And they brought it before God, foreign fire that he had not commanded them. That he had not commanded them. And the fire went forth from before God and consumed them, and they died before God. And Moshe said to Aaron, this is what God spoke when he said, I will be sanctified through those near to me, and before all the people I will be glorified. And Aaron was silent. There's so much there, but we can't go into all of the details. Various commentators, they explain Nadav and Avihu, what they did wrong, but we're not going to focus on that. We're going to focus on, well, we got a bit of a practical problem over here. What's the problem? We've got a glorious day of celebration, the inauguration of the Mishkan, the altar, blessings of the Jewish people. The Shekhinah of divine presence of God is revealed. And all of a sudden, what do we got? 2 dead Jews in the holies that need to be buried. So the verse relates that Mishal and Elizaphan and Elizaphan, who are cousins to Moshe and Aaron, they're called to the task. Text 5b, and before you, and Moshe summoned Mishal and Elizaphan, the sons of Aaron's uncle Uzziel, and said to them, draw near, carry your kinsmen from within the sanctuary to the outside of the camp. So they approached and carried them with their tunics to the outside of the camp, as Moshe had spoken. Now, the Torah is very deliberate over here. What is it telling us? That they buried Nadav and Avihu, but it tells us their relationship, that they're cousins to Moshe and Aaron. And from the deceased Nadav and Avihu, their cousins once removed. Now, this seems to be a strange choice for 2 reasons. They were Levites, meaning they were serving in the Mishkan. They were there in that day and doing their job. So they have a very personal connection to the Mishkan. Why pull them away from the celebrations that they are a part of and involved in that celebration, meaning that they have duties to be involved in as Levites? Could have taken non-Levites to bury them. Why was it that they were chosen as Levites? And no less the fact that they are also relatives. So to answer this question, let's give some kind of metaphor for this. Maybe that'll help us and put it into a context. Imagine you're marrying off your only child, your daughter. It may not even have to be, but let's say it's your only child, it's your daughter, you're marrying her off, right? Very, glorious, celebrative day. All of a sudden you realize, oh my gosh, where's my beautiful diamond ring that I normally would wear to the celebration, but I can't find it. Now, you might take a few moments to look for it, but after a few moments you realize you can't, and then you're kind of rushed because, the wedding must go on. You're going to divert your attention from it, and you're going to look for it tomorrow. You'll deal with it. But right now, what's more important? So you won't wear the ring. Okay. The wedding is more important, to celebrate your daughter's wedding. So where you might be anxious, you'll leave the anxiety for tomorrow. Right now, you're going to push it away, and you're going to focus in on the wedding. Now, not belittling the value of a very expensive diamond ring, but you're going to make that choice. After all, it is your daughter's wedding, and this is precisely what Rashi explains that this day is. Rashi in the Parsha, he says, carry your kinsman from within the sanctuary, as a person would say to his fellow when someone had died at a wedding feast. Remove the deceased from before the bride so as not to disturb the joyous occasion. Here, Mishal and Elizaphan were to remove the dead from inside the sanctuary, as not to disturb the serenity of the investitures of sanctuary. So For the Jews celebrating the inaugural moment of the Mishkan, it was a bittersweet moment. Instead of completely being focused, right, completely being focused on the joy of the moment, they're forced to contend with, painful emotions, grief. Two righteous people passed away in the Mishkan, no less. Now, it's a delicate and sensitive situation, and decisions need to be made. But what would you focus on that day? So what does Moshe do? He arranges that the body should be taken out discreetly. Don't make a hoo-ha about it, because this day is about the Mishkan. It's about the celebration. Now, please note, that doesn't mean we are making less of the passing of two people, two Jews, two holy, righteous souls, actually, as Moshe earlier said in the verse, right? Of course, it would be mourned. That would be the day after, just like the ring. You'll get the ring. You'll find it the day after. You'll get to the morning. You'll get to to deal with that in an appropriate manner. So it's only being pushed off, not being eliminated, right? Now, concerning the fact that the point of doing all of this and the way it was done was to conserve or to preserve the atmosphere in the proper manner, right? The Levite was the perfect person to do it. Why? How come? Why would he be the perfect person? Because they're trusted to preserve the Mishkan. That's their job. That's part of their job. One of the jobs of the Levites was actually in the times of the Holy Temple, not in the Mishkan, but later on in the Holy Temple, that they would be guards to actually preserve. But in other manners, that was part of their duties. So the Kohen cannot impurify himself, so it couldn't be a Kohen doing it, who also does duties in the Mishkan, of course. They can't impurify themselves because of the special nature of their job, but the Levites could. And therefore they could involve themselves in the burial, right? They're the perfect choice. Removing the bodies was part of the Levites' jobs. It wasn't a regular job, obviously. It's not something that usually happened, right? But their role was to protect the Mishkan. So burying the bodies is preserving the atmosphere of the Mishkan. I remember many years ago, I was at a wedding, and the father of the groom had a massive heart attack by the wedding, and he'd come from Iran actually for the wedding. He was living in Iran, come for the wedding. He was taken, of course, to the hospital right away, and the celebrations continued. It didn't stop. It wouldn't be right, because there's a mitzvah of the wedding celebration. So whoever had to take care of, took care of this individual, and whoever, had to make sure that the atmosphere continued in a beautiful atmosphere. So the same thing as over here. The role of the Levites is to preserve. So they had the role to make sure that these bodies would spoil the atmosphere. So that was given to Michelle and Al Tzafan doing this job. So again, most conventional Levite jobs are not of that nature. But this was at this time, and this is precisely what the Rebbe explains in the Sikha from this week's Parsha. It says, burying the deceased was not an active, positive service like singing in the Mishkan, which the Levites would do, which creates the right atmosphere, right? Rather, it was a negative action, removing items that would disrupt the Mishkan service. So, so you might say, or you might think, well, it looks like that Michelle and El Safan, they got the shorter end of the stick. In other words, the rest of the Levites were attending the party. They were celebrating. They were there in full view of the divine presence of God. An amazing, experience to be a participant of. And what do they get? They get to bury two individuals. Yes, this was, we understand that this is an act, that this was something that they need to do to preserve the atmosphere. But the attitude they might have, and naturally, could have, is, hey, I didn't sign up for this. I want to be at the celebration. That's inspirational, not digging a grave.
But it was their relatives. It was their relatives. They probably would not be able to celebrate so well if they knew their two relatives died.
Aaron celebrated, right? Moshe celebrated. He's the uncle, right?
Right.
So we got to ask ourselves a question. What could make them feel good about the fact that they're bearing their cousins? Okay, it is their cousins. And of course, we're not saying about the action to do it. They did it because Moshe told them they had to do it. So we get, that we appreciate, that we can understand. Okay, you got to do it. We're not talking about that. We're talking about an attitude now. How is it that you can have an attitude, right, that you do this joyfully? That's the question. Again, going back to our original question, there are some mitzvahs that talk to us, other mitzvahs that don't, that we don't particularly enjoy emotionally. We don't understand the value of them and the meaning behind them, right? So sometimes we feel that we're really sacrificing while others are getting a high old good time. I'm sure many of us have felt that way. Hey, what am I stuck doing this? Why is everybody else having a good time on my cheshbon, on my shoulders, right? That's our original question. How could we deal with this in a way that that's not the attitude we have? That we don't feel, oh, I'm stuck with burying my cousins. I missed out on the event of the century. I mean, think about it, right? So I've spoken about this idea many times, and that is we have a choice on how to see things, what camera lens we view the world with, what reality we want to live in. We have a choice. In other words, just because I feel a certain way doesn't mean I have to see it that way, right? So let's take Michelle and El Safan over here. Now, their job might have been, not so glamorous, but think about it. If you kind of give it context, what they did enabled everyone else to have joy. Because if they didn't deal with the bodies, the Jewish people wouldn't be able to focus on the joy of the moment. So their actions are far more powerful than any other two people that were celebrating. Any other two people were celebrating? They're two celebrants amongst many. They saved the day. They saved the day. Now, again, it may be an appealing the job, but actually when you think about it, it makes it more meaningful though, right? And therefore more inspirational to be able to do this, right? Because you're giving context to this. you're giving the capacity for everybody else to enjoy. No other two people, or maybe Aaron the high priest, okay, that's one thing. But a regular two Levites, what did they contribute? Right? What did they contribute compared to what they contributed to this day? As a matter of fact, in the Torah, no other two Levites are mentioned on this day, only them. And what they contributed. It's not glamorous. You missed the show. Chas v'shalom, I don't want to call it a show, but, to put it in modern day terms, God forbid it wasn't a show. It was, the divine presence of God. It was like a very, momentous and glorified holy moments. But that's greater. I'll give you a modern day example of this. And if anybody knows what Chaverim is or Hatzalah. Anybody know what Hatzalah is? Hatzalah is an amazing Jewish organization. Folks, I don't know if you know yet, but I'll tell you. I'll spill the beans. Mi ka'amcha Yisrael goy echad ba'aretz. Who is like you, the Jewish people, the only people on earth like that? And Hatzalah and Chaverim bring this out. During the winter, I had, my car didn't start one time. Another time, keys got locked. I call Chaverim. Chaverim means friends. And they come. In the freezing cold weather and open up the door for me. No charge. Just a service. Friends. Avos Yisrael. Hatzalah means to save. Hatzalah has ambulances. I remember very clearly when my mother-in-law, blessed memory, she stayed by us. This is many years before she passed. And during the holiday, she has something wrong with her, something like a stroke. In the middle of their meal, guys are coming with all kinds of oxygen tanks, all the different kinds of apparatus. Hasidic, Yidden, Chaverim, Hatzalah, Hasidic Jews. They come there before, when you call 911, that'll take 10 minutes. They're there in 3 minutes and already helping. Urgent Santé or whatever ambulance service you call it in any city that you have, whoever has Hatzalah will always be there quicker because they're there, they're. And now, can you imagine, we had it in our synagogue here. On Rosh Hashanah, someone wasn't well. I go myself and call on the holiday itself to Hatzalah, to 911, to Hatzalah. And they're in the middle of their meal with their family and they run away. Much more enjoyable to spend your time with your family than to come to deal with someone who's got whatever. But the fact that you can save a life and you can be a part of that, when you understand that you're helping another individual, the experience of being with your family and enjoying your family and having a wonderful meal that's enjoyable is grand. But saving a life is much more meaningful ultimately. So imagine with, going out in the cold weather, you go down the steps and you trip on the steps and you whatever, lugging the stuff, and it's a big pain and everything. You don't think about that. You know why? Because you're doing something meaningful. You're doing something impactful. And this is exactly what Mishal and El Safan. They didn't feel that they're missing out on the celebration. Rather, they felt they were partaking in the celebration in a different way. They were preserving the celebration. And it could be that what they did was more integral than anything else, than the actual merrymaking. That's actually what the Rebbe shares with us in the Sikha. So it emerges that in doing this service, Mishal and El Safan were not removed from rejoicing in the Mishkan. Taking Nadav and Abihu out of the Mishkan was how they took part in the Simcha. We have now security team in that are volunteers here in our synagogue, right? So it takes away from some of the prayers because they're making the rounds, they're doing this, they're helping out. But you know what? That's part of their commitment to prayer. It's expressed in a different way. Might not be as heartfelt. It might not be as they're not singing all the songs because they got to run here and do that, da da da. But you know what? This is an example of how they partake. The Torah tells us about taking the ashes from the altar, bringing an offering. Awesome. An offering is like bringing yourself on the altar. You're bringing through that animal is bringing the animal within you on the altar. That's an awesome, engagement that you can really feel the experience of it. The ashes thereafter, big deal. Is that something special? The Torah tells us, yeah, it is special. You got to lift the ashes. It's a mitzvah to lift the ashes. It's one of the priestly jobs. And you have to go to the mikvah and you have to put on your special clothes. You have to have your hands and feet washed and so on. It's only removing ashes. No, it's part and parcel of the divine service that is integral and important. As Rabbeinu ben Asher, Achi ben Asher says, we learn that even when it comes to the mitzvah of removing the ashes from the altar, which would seem to be a light mitzvah, not such a great thing. God instructed us to honor the mitzvah. It is performed by the Kohen. It is dressed in priestly vestments. This demonstrates a general approach anyone who wishes to come close to God ought to assume. Whatever it is that he or she is doing, it is for God. They ought to regard it with much honor, being humble in the face of God, whom they are honoring. This approach applies to even the lightest of modes of service. Right? So, as Viktor Frankl says, in Man's Search for Meaning, that a human being can withstand almost any pain if they have a reason or a purpose in it. So conversely, we can take pleasure in almost anything if we can find meaning in it and value in it. And this is maturity of a person. A child has pleasure. My grandchildren were served a sweet ice cream after dinner, a parva, sweet ice cream that their bubby made, and they have pleasure from it. Yesterday when we were singing the melodies, I can't say they had such pleasure in it. You know why they didn't have such pleasure in it? They're not that mature yet. In ideas, they may be, they're pretty smart kids and they understand ideas. So understanding an idea doesn't mean you have pleasure in it. To have pleasure from a concept, to have pleasure from a godly concept in Tanya or in the Parsha. What does that mean? It means we start off, our pleasure is so limited. When we mature, we can have pleasure that is broadened from an apple to a song to an idea to a godly idea. Same thing in human relations. Immature people have pleasure from certain people. When you mature, what happens when you mature? The pleasure you can have from others is broadened. You can have a pleasure from someone whose character is diametrically opposed yours and different than you totally. Usually, you're going to appreciate people that are like you. That's an immaturity. Why is it an immaturity? because our perspective is very narrow. Our mind hasn't broadened, that therefore allowed us to emotionally entertain and appreciate somebody and have pleasure for someone who is totally not like me, right? So when we can find value and meaning in such a way, that's an amazing thing. So same thing when it comes to a mitzvah. To find a mitzvah that you enjoy and that you do, absolutely, we should do that. And as we've spoken in previous classes, that which you have a passion, that's your gateway. That mitzvah is an important mitzvah that you should hone and that you have such great passion and a pleasure in doing. Absolutely. However, that's not sufficient. We need to be able to broaden that. We need to be able to mature in our mind and to be able to give greater context. When you can give greater context in how you look at a person and appreciating a person, right, for who they are and what's unique and special about them, not what they're not, but who they are. When we can appreciate that, we broaden the perspective on people that allows us to enjoy them. Literally to enjoy them. That's a chush, that's a talent that we have to work on being able to do that with people, to be able to do that in all areas of life. And of course with a mitzvah. That mitzvah that isn't so meaningful. We need to be able to give it the proper contextual vision and to give it the proper meaning and value that it has. That when we see that, we can broaden. And now it may not be we're not going to have the same passion for it. Maybe some other things that we do have a passion for. Fine. It's difficult to have passion for every mitzvah, right? I don't think necessarily that's what it's meant to be, that every mitzvah will be done in the same passion. No. Okay. As again, we said, there's that gateway of those things that we have a passion, but we'll be able to broaden because we're going to give the proper context of things and value and meaning to it that will be able to give us a way that we can celebrate with it. So as long as I make it about me, then it's going to be really hard because I live in a box. And whatever fits in that box, whatever people fit into that box that I have pleasure from, whatever experiences that fit into that box that I have pleasure from, whatever mitzvahs that fit in that box that I have pleasure from, those are the things I engage in. Because I live in that, but I can choose my reality. I can choose beyond that. I can broaden that. And that's again, it starts with the mind and giving a context and giving a value to that person, that event, and of course, in our instance over here, that mitzvah. And when I can do that. I've broadened my world. I've allowed so many more people enter into my world, so many more events that I can give a context and a meaning and a value to that can now enter and be meaningful, a positive experience, as opposed to a negative experience. And that's the role that we have. Rabbi Nachman Sudak, Alav Shalom of blessed memory, was the head shliach of the Rebbe in London, England, and he was honored with the Order of the British Empire, which is the second highest order. Just under the the order of the British, or commander of order of the British Empire, so here, whatever. So, anyways, he was coming to get the order to Buckingham Palace by the Queen of England. May she live and be well. And as he's walking down, the pomp and ceremony, not yet, in one of the hallways inside of the palace, coming to the room, I guess, I don't know what room it was, where the Queen is and where the ceremony takes place, a tissue fell out from his pocket. Here, he noticed. I'm not even certain if it was from his pocket or he just noticed a tissue on the floor. I don't even know if it was from his pocket, right? And he went and bent down to pick up the tissue. Not nice, a tissue, and in the palace. And one of the royal servants stopped him and reprimanded him and said, "This is the royal palace. Only Her Majesty's servants may clean it." You hear that? He said, the obvious lesson is pretty obvious based on what we learned from earlier, right? This world is God's royal palace. If we see it as a jungle, so then we've got a problem. But if we see it as God's garden, a royal palace, cleaning it, bearing to people, doing the dirty work is not dirty work. It's God's royal palace. And only the Majesty's servants, I'm God's servant, I can clean it. So, whoa, when I think about it that way, cleaning the dishes is not such a bad task. Now, cleaning dishes, you can always get someone else to do it, right? It's not a mitzvah to clean dishes, right? It's a mitzvah to use beautiful dishes at the Shabbos table. But in order that those dishes should be clean and be beautiful at the Shabbos table, which is a mitzvah, they have to be cleaned. Okay, you can get someone else to clean it. But if for whatever reason you need to clean it, it's God's royal palace. His Shabbos dishes, or even weekday dishes. I'm the Majesty God's servant. I could clean it. Okay. Again, doesn't mean you have to run for that because there's not a specific mitzvah in cleaning the dishes, right? But if you have to do it, like I did today, I didn't even think of this one. Just came to me now. From Pesach, I was cleaning some of the dishes tonight to help at home. I don't have a problem doing it. Now, if we can have someone else do it and I could learn more Torah, that's even better, right? But the context and the perspective I had is, hey, it's my Majesty's dishes, my wife's. And I'm in her royal service. No problem. I didn't feel a ball and chain. Like, no. This is my service. Sometimes the service is going to be a thrilling niggin, an uplifting niggin, like we sang yesterday, Daled Bavos, the 4 stanzas of the Alter Rebbe that we sing under the chuppah. It's worth getting married just so you can sing that song, because you're not allowed to sing that song, only on special occasions. On a holiday, we sing it. And it's like, it's rapturous. It's like, your neshama is flying. It's beautiful. It's a lot more heartfelt, a lot more spiritual than the washing of the dishes today. But you know what? I felt it as an honor to clean the dishes. I didn't feel it as a problem, an issue, again, The niggin is something you got to do on the holiday. That you have to do. Washing the dishes, someone else can do it. If you have a cleaning lady and she can do it and you don't have to do it, then, it's not something you, but in the fact of doing it because it had to be done, what a privilege. I felt it as a privilege. I didn't feel anything negative about it at all. Why is that? Because it's God's royal palace. And the royal majesty servant is going to clean. That's what we got to remember. When we give it the context, the importance, then there won't be any mitzvah that's going to be too small or too degrading. Every mitzvah, we can do it with a great zest and a love and a devotion. Again, it may not be with the same passion. I can't say I did those dishes with passion like I sang the niggin or like giving the class now. Maybe that's my fault. Maybe that's my lack. I still got, but I did it with a joy. I didn't do it with, a ball and chain. But why? Because I gave it the proper context to it. I didn't realize that, after learning this sikha, how that applied to what I did the dishes when I did the dishes. But so it does. I told you. What did I tell you before? What did I tell you? There's only one God, one Torah, one Jewish people, and there's only a oneness of everything. It's all tied in. We could see our whole day and everything we do and everything that's engaged, that in that there's a thread between it all. It's all connected. But when we pick and choose like this and like that, so then we're not to, and we feel that this is a ball and chain, and this I love, this I like, and this, you're not going to get there because it's all about your bubble. You got to burst that bubble. And that we're the royal servant. I'm here to serve happily. Any questions, any comments, any thoughts? Well, come on. My gosh. You're really taken for you're speechless.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm finding myself doing things I didn't see myself doing before learning about the meaning in these Tanya classes and Parshah, and like the meaning behind them, the context, and just that information in itself, it just sparks action.
Yeah, very much so. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else have something to share?
I don't know. I'm just tired, but I just think it's very difficult to have to think always about Hashem and the context before I do something. And it's just a lot of thinking, a lot of work, a lot of.
It is, but you know what? We got to let what we learn kind of filter in, and eventually it filters in enough. It becomes us. See, we're learning right now. What does it mean to learn? What does it mean to learn? Learn is not you're doing anything, right? You're not doing anything. You're just comprehending. But when you comprehend it here, and it makes sense to you here, and you have a clarity here,
And you want to integrate it.
it's going to filter into your heart. A little bit at a time, not all right away. I mean, we do have the neck that kind of gets clogged. It gets, stuck. Make sure you don't have any, wishbones stuck there. But things do get stuck, absolutely. And they don't filter down. But the more we learn, the more it's going to filter, the more it's going to then become something that's going to be latent in our heart. It's going to become more of a reality for us. It's going to become more real for us. And then and it's going to be just, hey, all of a sudden, hey, I'm doing these dishes, and I'm all right, or I'm doing, this mitzvah that I really didn't, have a feeling for, and I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to do it. Yeah, does that, Leah, does that make a little sense?
Yes, God willing, it'll enter me more easily with time.
It's all with time. It's all with time. We got till 120. This is not about, like tomorrow you got to wake up and you're a failure if all of a sudden, you're doing the dishes and you're feeling, are you going shopping for, for post Pesach foods, and, you're just not really, you're not into going shopping. I didn't mean for clothes, lady, for clothes, that's a different story, but, for food, or, that you're going shopping for things that, but when, just give yourself a moment when you're feeling the ball and chain, back up in your mind, think, my gosh, what I'm doing has real value and meaning. I'm going to allow my family to have strength to do what they got to do the mitzvahs they do, or whatever it is. Or you're preparing for Shabbos. I know preparing for Shabbos, I mean, here in Montreal, we still can't have guests. But, still preparing for Pesach, preparing for Shabbos when you have guests or you have whatever. And it's painstaking, and, you could feel a little begrudged. Could have had a, easy day off and, just prepared for 2 people rather than 15 people. Could. And it's natural. But then try to contextualize it. Give yourself, I know for my wife that works for her tremendously, because, making Shabbos can be a chore. But then, people at the table, and you see the impact that you've made at the table in people's lives, and how meaningful it was for them, and so on and so forth. And all of a sudden, it just all evaporates. So if we could contextualize that beforehand when we're doing it, it won't make it a chore anymore. That doesn't mean that it's not, difficult, right? But you're not focused on that. I mean, it's amazing. I remember, actually, it's his birthday today. Tzachi, those who know Tzachi, it's his birthday today. He was here in Shul, he davened for the Omid and Aliyah. We farbrang afterwards. We sat and spent some time together. So, a whole story for those who, whatever, he was moving from to his new home, and whatever, the movers were whatever, not kosher movers. They didn't do appropriately, trying to exhort him for more money than what they initially made up. Whatever, you have these kind of, you have to be careful with moving companies. If you're paying a lot of money, you're getting probably a good company. When you're paying a lot less money, so you're probably getting a company that it could be, I wouldn't say all companies like that, but it could be that, they're going to try to get you on the other side because they have your goods. That's what happened with him. Could you imagine? And he wouldn't, like, he's, very, what's the word? Strong-minded individual. He wasn't going to give them the money. So they dumped his goods. Didn't tell him where. And it was a pouring, rainy night. And by some divine providence, I think, he found it. He calls me. I get on the phone. Within 5 minutes, a truck was there, a pickup truck. I came with my van, and we took all of the goods, pouring rain, to salvage whatever we could and to bring him to his new home. We didn't feel the rain, and it was miserable. Miserable. The rain didn't bother us. Nothing bothered. All that we cared was we were focused on one thing: to salvage whatever we could salvage of his home. That's all that mattered. That's all that counted. Who wants to do such a thing? But better you could enjoy the comforts of your home. I called people that didn't know him, even didn't know him, and they came from Utraman, from Chassidim, from Utraman, came with a truck. That's why I said earlier, Mika Amcha Goy Echad Ba'aretz, Israel Goy Echad, who's a Jewish people. This only exists by the Jewish people. It doesn't exist by any other people in the world. Friends will come to help friends, but if you don't know the person, you'll never come to help them in such a manner. You're going to bring your truck? They didn't even know who he was. He came. So the call's made. A Jew's in trouble. Oh, a Jew's in trouble. There you are. Not knowing who it is. And it was like remarkable. But because we felt a purpose, we felt we're helping. We're salvaging the person's home. Nothing mattered, all the pain and suffering and the craziness. It was like it went till after midnight. I remember it was like so crazy. Now a regular person, like, oh, I don't want to get dirty and deal with this and so on. But when you realize what it is, and that's what Chaverim is. Imagine 30 below, and you're coming, not getting paid for this. You're doing it as a kindness. No one's getting paid for it. Nothing on the side even. I even say here, I want to give tzedakah to the organization. It says, I'm sorry, I won't take. Send it in. They won't even take. They're doing a mitzvah, helping another. It's cold, it's damp, they don't feel that. You just feel that they're helping another. So again, when we can give that proper context in what we're doing, boy, is that going to change things in our engagement and what we do. Any questions? All right, folks. God bless you all. Tomorrow morning, 9:30, we're back for Tanya. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for joining. God bless you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
Diane. Who else is with? Esther's with us. Leah, Liana, Andrew. Oh, thank you for making it.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Irma, thank you for joining. And Michael. Alice is with us. Who else? Linda and Liba and Davida. And Robert. Thank you all. And Art. Of course, Art. Thank you all. Be well. Good tavach. Enjoy.
All right, everyone.
Be well. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, folks, before I forget, the JLI course is coming up. It's an amazing course. I want to tell you now, you're the first to let you know. Of course, Mashiach. This is for me the ultimate course, the ultimate teachings. It'll be Wednesday night starting the end of April. I'm going to send out an email in the next couple of days. You definitely want to join this particular course. You don't want to miss it. More info to come. God bless you.
God bless you, Rabbi.
Thank you. Bye-bye.